Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And Bill, we talked a little bit last time at the end of our last episode about where do we go from here as a nation? And that's a really big question to answer. But what I think we can have a meaningful discussion about is, some things that are very clear in our current events in the last week that really show a struggle within the Republican Party for leadership, and a struggle between that and values and public service.
Right.
And
right.
it seems, it almost feels like some Republicans are like walking on eggshells here, right?
They really kind of are. And it's the public service versus self-service mindset. The self-service mindset is that, like I have flexibility, I have choices, and I'm going to exercise those. And the public service is what's best for the people, and let me take an action step towards it. And it doesn't mean that, there's always going to be certain politicians that are better at being out there in the public and supporting it, both Democrats and Republicans. There's people that are better at really caring for or stepping into helping the people or demonstrating boots on the ground. And and then there's kind of folks that talk about boots on the ground, but really just meet with their small groups of followers, and then they broadcast as if they're meeting to everybody, and then the person resonates with that message and then follows them because they make a judgment about the other side. So if a Democrat does something kind or supportive, the judgmental mind will and the belief mind will click it to, well, they're just doing that, they're not authentic. It's like, no, I think I see their feet there. Now we could talk about whether or not they show up for 5 minutes, or we can talk about if they're showing up for an hour, or if they're doing X amount of time in work or providing the public something. But you can see that some people think that it's enough for Trump to go to Puerto Rico and throw out paper towels. Meanwhile, not putting any money and support, and they're going like, oh, that's enough. He was there. He had some meetings, and he flew back because he's the commander in chief and he has other things to do. But then there's the person that really takes an action and causes a meaningful change to take place. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, media does really a pretty crappy job of this, which is they can under-proportionalize things and they can over-proportionalize things. And we've talked about that last show. It's like you can take one word out of context, hammer that, and then all of a sudden you've just escalated the word fairness, where it wasn't a fairness conversation. It was a clarity conversation. So this is when it gets very, very difficult. And we've had some senators and some governors kind of make some statements and now are going to be exposed to our current environment of hyper exposure of choices. So there's the hyper exposure. So
oh my gosh,
it's really, really tough.
It is tough. There's no better example right now than Senator Ted Cruz of Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, boy, did he step on a landmine that he forgot he buried himself. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's a self-inflicted wound here with him.
It is. It is. It's going to affect his. It's going to affect his president his ever hopes of being presidency. That that the amount of exposure there is going like, do you really want that guy? That guy that did this and that guy that did that.
Oh my
Now he
gosh.
might get it done in he might get it done in Texas again because you've got to have somebody that is going to um, say enough is enough. And, whether Beto takes on that again, or is there somebody else that wants to run against him again in 6 years, or actually now it would be 4 years now,
Correct. Four
that they
more.
take another run at him for 4 years, that, we're still going to be seeing messages because this character has wanted to run for president and has run for president several times already. And so it's like, and it's kind of, and that's the tenacity that Nixon had, by the way. Keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. Well, we know Nixon, so let's put him in there, and well, although we took JFK over Nixon, well, we'll take Nixon this time now,
Yeah,
and
Nixon
really
was
do.
the political cat that had nine lives, really. And when you think about it,
Correct, correct. And the hyper exposure right now that's taking place, um, is causing, folks to walk on eggshells and not saying things, or just saying things that are in alignment with where the vote is. They're not interested in the truth. They're just interested in who is the illusionary vote that the whose belief in me or the Republicans. I'm just going to say things that are going to be safe for that. So Marco Rubio is caught there, as well as, well, the Florida folks are caught there because the numbers are terrible,
oh my gosh,
in that space.
when you see a lot of the elected leaders in the Senate and in Congress, they definitely are, they're leaning whichever way the base wind is blowing, right? And they are not speaking about their core values. They're not being guided by their core values. Look at, yes, you mentioned Marco Rubio. There are plenty of sound bites to play of him saying one thing and then going back on it and saying another. Lindsey Graham is another great example of that. You have, you have a lot of that going on. But
Right.
what's really shocking, and what really peels back the curtain on an elected leader's values and motivation, is something like what happened this week with Ted Cruz, who,
Right.
in the midst of a really serious crisis in his state,
So such a bad crisis they have.
several
Yeah.
on several levels. I mean, you have an unprecedented weather event that's like once in a
Right.
150-year type of event in Texas, at least from history. And, freezing cold weather that just does not happen there. To then the power crisis that
Right.
was,
Right.
spurred by that. And then the water crisis. And you know all too much about water crises, Bill.
Water crisis. Yeah.
So you got this, triple threat going on in Texas. And Ted Cruz and his wife make the decision to get out of Dodge
Yeah.
and go somewhere warm and sunny and comfy. And that in and of itself was probably um, ill advised, not the wisest decision to make, to go and
No,
do
not the
that.
wisest decision. No, no, it was not wise. It was
But
not wise.
then
I think,
one
yeah,
thing
and
gets worse after another, doesn't it? As
it
he's
it does.
communicating
It
it.
does. Yeah, because then you got to go on your apology tour, and the apology tour is going on media and going on Fox News and getting support from, Hannity and others, saying the sentence, "It's not that big of a deal. If I was him, I would do that too." In other words, if I was him and I was rich, I probably would fly out of Texas too. And, there were many people that could afford leaving Texas, private citizens that did leave Texas and did fly to other states and to get out of the cold, and they left. And the the public servant, the person that rolls up their sleeves, puts on an extra jacket, my view set, puts on the extra jacket, goes out there and figures out, okay, where can I be most helpful? Or in the case of other legislator, Congress people, they raise money to give money to people that can help them. They become an advocacy for, you know, the people that are there, the voters that are there. And there's no mistake that, there are people in Texas that got affected by uh, Ted Cruz's the experience and the oxygen being sucked out of their situation and stuff. And it's weird. Our time on hyperexposure and hyperinformation is a little weird, Tom, because I learned more about the Texas electrical grid than I ever could have. You know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Forget it. I would not know that Texas has its own grid that is completely separate from the entire nation.
I did
I
not know that
was
either.
going like, what? And it's poorly it's poorly regulated because they wanted to play. They don't want to do the regulation. They want to spend it on. It's the turbines that they complained about weren't winterized. All they had to do was be winterized, but they weren't winterized, so they weren't able to run. And that's why they didn't run. They didn't run because they didn't fail. They run because somebody didn't do maintenance on them.
Well,
And
and not only that, Bill, the wind
very disheartening.
turbines, which were the very fast scapegoat of right-wing media, and even the governor of Texas got baited by Sean Hannity. I don't know if you saw that in an interview where he got baited into blaming the green energy sources for this problem, which in the analysis of this, that Texas state's own energy commission, it's like, yeah, that wasn't actually the problem. What they actually, I heard them on a radio interview a couple days ago, and they basically said that in fact the wind turbines performed
Yeah.
twice as well as they expected they would in this type of situation. And the real problem, all the other sources of electricity, gas powered and nuclear and other things, had other problems because of either the electricity, obviously I'm
The
sorry, the
lines were
cold
the lines were
lines
frozen.
were frozen.
The natural gas was the number one failure, and then there was a couple other ones before you get to the wind turbines,
Right.
which and and all a person needs is a talking point, and then they just hammer the talking point. So when and this is the thing to really just capture and realize about the hyperexposure and the hypersensitivity is that during the Benghazi trials, when Hillary Clinton sat for 11 hours and was asked questions slash interrogated, that thing, all they did was get one sound bite out of that that was a little tragic.
When
And it
she
was a
was very
tragic sound.
tired and frustrated, right?
Was tired and frustrated, and she did not have Bill Sturley's skills to be able to stare that down and go like, yeah, I guess that you're really feeling worried and concerned, and you would like some trust right now. Is that correct? In other words, put the crap back on them. And is this about trust, or are you looking to get more clarity? In other words, make the question that is so volatile, or the baited question that's being posed to the person, one that actually deepens the situation, not to avoid the baited question. You want to actually step into the baited question. So if I were on Ted Cruz's team and I walked into and I had to clean this mess up as a communication specialist, the first thing I would do is take the listener through my decision making and fall on the sword of integrity. That was not just call yourself on it. I was caring for my kids. My thought I could work remotely came into my mind, and I wanted to get family connection time with my kids, and I could work remotely, and I can do that from another location. the and call yourself on it. The optics does not look good, but my thought structure was this. Here were the 7 phone calls that I would have done. This is what, yes, I would have done it from the comfort of a hotel room where the constituents are not doing so. Constituents are freezing and things like that. That part's true, but I thought it would be better served that I could be more effective if I had that place, as well as get family and connection time at the same time. I could see it wasn't a really strong choice, and call yourself on the misstep. Don't like wiggle out and say, well, on further thing, I probably thought about this and it's like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
that
you're not
just
even falling
becomes
on the sword.
it becomes whiny noise and excuses for sure. And honestly, even if Ted Cruz had done that, if he had Bill Sturley's skills and he
Right,
recognized, okay, he erred here, but here's how he's gonna try to clean it up. And while
right.
some may argue, okay, you can't really clean this up, or too little too late, or whatever, at least he'd be there wouldn't be calls for him to resign as much if he had used Bill
Oh
Sturley's
yeah,
skills
yeah.
and
The
cleaned it up.
resigning thing. It's called, it's the unconscious mistake, which what we call that. Kind of the slang is a honest mistake. It's really an unconscious or a lapse where one part of our rational mind, and he is an attorney, so he has a rational, logical mindset. He completely rationalizes it, and I don't know what his record is on public service or social service, so I can't really actually comment on how much does he help the state of Texas and the people in it. That's for other people to decide upon. I don't know what it is, and I just know when he gets himself into the pickles that he gets himself in, and he starts playing to win at the expense of truth and ignore truth at the expense of integrity and support others at the expense of fairness. I have a list of those, but those are
Well,
just small examples. I mean, those are just examples. So I'll follow my own bias, mindset, but at the same time, is that when if in this world of hyperexposure, it's a little, we got to, they've got to have the second message, which is what happens if the crap hits the fan. You got to be ready to have your second message. And that's what the show's about, is about creating the second communication message that still allows human beings to make the mistakes that they do, but also be able to maintain their ability to have or restore integrity in a short amount of time, to prop up and advocate for truth at the same time, and empathize with falsehoods. You got to empathize with those. You can't like ignore them. You've got to like empathize with them, and that's the way to get out,
well,
of the experience.
and although Ted Cruz would be having a much better day today had he had Bill Sturley's skills and done that, as you suggested, he still would have been facing an uphill battle, especially when you see how quickly Beto O'Rourke and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez leapt into action to serve the public in different ways. AOC
Correct.
goes and raises, at this point, at the time of recording this, she's raised over $3 million to help the people of Texas.
Unbelievable.
And no matter what you do as Ted Cruz, if you didn't do that, you're in trouble.
Ted Cruz could have ran a campaign. I mean, excuse me, a fundraising program to raise money for certain communities and showed up with trucks. Well, I mean, had trucks ready as the snow was cleared in order to get things ready, and generators. I mean, they could have they could have liquidated generators and dropped generators all over the place for, all these community centers or high schools or whatever. And this is where you come to get warm, instead of, yeah, we came here. I mean, one of the newscasters on, yeah, the lines around here, and we got turned away from the community center because it was full. I was going like, oh no. It's like not only is the infrastructure bad, but the infrastructure is bad to support the bad infrastructure. It's like you don't even have the back, and it's literally PPE all over the PP whatever the PPP stuff, protective stuff all over again. It's like you're not prepared for a pandemic and you're not prepared for this. Whereas, I was on a call with people in Idaho the other day, and they said, we know how to do snow. Everything's around snow. We know how to move snow. We know how to things. We know how to get snow out of driveways. We know how to get our car out of there. We know how to run it because we know snow. Texas doesn't know snow. They have no idea what snow's like, and stuff. So you're right. The optics on AOC and Beto supporting people has really made a big difference.
Well, and it shows, I think, their true intent. I mean, at least it appears that way. If it's not the real problem, that's certainly a communication problem for Ted Cruz, because AOC and Beto O'Rourke really believe, they're making people believe through their actions that they're there helping the people, and they're trying to do the best to help them through the situation, and they're not just, running to try to phone it in from Cancun just because that's
Right.
more comfortable for them. And actually, Beto O'Rourke, I want to mention one other thing. He is from El Paso, Texas. We know that. And interestingly, Bill, as I've learned also a lot about the Texas electric grid this week, El Paso is actually different than the rest of Texas. It's the one area of Texas that's not a part of this isolated Texas Lone Star State grid. And because of that, they're connected with New Mexico and Arizona and adjacent states.
Right.
And when they lost power, they only lost it for a couple hours, and it came back on because they could bring in electricity from other states.
From other states.
Right.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
they're much better off there in terms of the electricity issue. But this has been a real serious problem in Texas. I have friends in
Yeah.
Texas. I know you and I both have people we know in Texas
Mhm.
who have put videos on Facebook of completely
Yes.
empty grocery store shelves.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's real what's going on there. And just,
That's very, very apocalyptic. That's very, 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 very unsettling, because if there's nothing on the shelf, then that is the hope is 5 days before that stuff comes back in, and you got to hope that the snow thing it melts, and you can see that and I really get that you don't need to overstock or have a backup, but you really actually need to figure out, as a person of public service, what does my state need if everything shut down? How much material do I need so that there's not a blip for anywhere between 10 days and 2 weeks? How much stuff do I need in storage for that? At least that, not the thing hits, our pants are down, we're freezing out here, and there's no way to get it. And then everyone is rushing for water at a public park, because they think it's good because it's the only place to get water, because our pipes are frozen, and are very, very disheartening and very unsettling, you know?
it
So,
sure is. And so this is very interesting, public service versus self-service. I mean, it really puts into focus what elected officials are supposed to be doing for their people they
what's the
represent.
job?
Yeah.
What's the job? Now, the part of the job is to write laws. Part of the job is represent the state, to write the laws the way you would like to. Hopefully, benefits your state or makes things better. It may not benefit your state, but it makes things better. Nobody in California wants to pay more taxes so that other states can get the support that they need. Nobody in New York wants to say, listen, we are so glad to pay a $1.75 and we only get $1 back, and 75 cents goes into helping the state of Mississippi or Alabama, because they've got to make some changes and they're doing some stuff to grow their economies, and we're going to tax our people to make it work. So it's unsettling, but that's the value of the United States, and the Texas grid is a great example of the nation of Texas treating itself as the nation of Texas, and then the nation of Texas voting to support the nation of Texas by low regulation, low taxes, leaning on infrastructure of the 1950s and 1960s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, leaning on that infrastructure to get you through. And you're not in the United States and you're not asking for help. But wait a minute, now, I mean, if this was Trump, I mean, Biden came in with the disaster money
Yeah,
in a
FEMA and
pretty timely
declarations. Yeah,
way.
very quickly.
It was pretty timely. It was not, there wasn't the anticipation on whether or not there was going to be money to come in to help the people. There wasn't any hesitancy as much. They talk through it. They talk through how much, what the support might be, how not to, what is the accurate contribution. But it wasn't like Puerto Rico going like, well, we'll see how much we're going to do, and then whatever later. It's like there wasn't any level of support for the American citizens down there, and so it's really and then oh my gosh, but this is the exasperation of that takes place when when the service orientation of the politician and the political leader is different than their individual value sets. And there are some people are not doing the Republican thing anymore because it doesn't match their values, you know? And that's a big part of what's happening in the Republican Party, and they're walking on eggshells because, well, we don't want to tell the truth to the 73 million people who voted for Trump.
Right.
You got to tell them the
That is
truth.
the struggle. And we're seeing that
Yeah.
the biggest example of that recently is in Arkansas, and the state senator there, Jim Hendren, has made national news because he's announced he's leaving the Republican Party because it's not maintaining the values that he's believed in his whole life. So he's taking a stand saying,
Yes.
I'm not just going to follow the Republican Party, who is really all about loyalty to one guy, President
Yeah.
Trump. I am, and there's going to be the struggle because he was expected to run for governor, and who else is running for governor? Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former press
Yeah.
secretary for Donald Trump, who is very loyal Trump supporter, and Trump's already backing her.
Yes. Yes.
But the current governor, Asa Hutchinson, who's actually the uncle of Jim Hendren,
Okay.
Asa Hutchinson has come out and said that he would not support President Trump if he ran in 2024 again. So you
Right.
have these fissures opening up, and there is this power
Yeah.
struggle going on in the Republican Party. I think it's just going to get worse for a long time before it gets better.
Yeah, their identity, and their by activating, well, as Trump activated the individuals that would have voted Republican anyways, and armed them with tragic, violent narrative. That's what he armed them with. Here are the bad Americans. We are the good Americans. And when he armed them with sentences that were similar or next to a comment that a person could take as racism or racist, and another person says he didn't mean it in a racist way, but it can be taken that way. What it does is it enlivens or emboldens that mindset. There's a good reason why in Germany that that the Nazi symbol is illegal. It's a good reason. Because we don't want that mindset and we're not doing that mindset here. That mindset and that value set caused a great suffering to take place to our people because that fascist ideology was was traumatizing, tragic, shameful, and not healthy for us. So that symbol is not allowed. Now, will the Confederate flag get into that category for the United States? Now, if you think about it, that's really unsettling because it was the symbol of. Now, I'm not as the Floridian, I used to see it as a novelty piece because the Civil War happened so long ago that some people see this. It's what do you call Dukes of Hazard, and
Well, that was what was in my mind, Bill, that I was going to bring up because when I was a kid, that was one of my favorite TV shows, and that flag was emblazoned on the roof of that car, the General Lee.
right,
In fact, the very name of that car, the General Lee, is in
really,
alignment with that. That's very troubling. And as a kid that's 10, 11 years old, 12 years old watching that show, you don't understand that. But
you do not understand that at all. And
yeah,
in my mind, aha, the General Lee, aha, the Confederate flag. It's like, wait a minute, that person was was the person that was fighting for his state and the economics of slavery, which is taking a group of people, making them work for free, and not letting them go anywhere and not have any freedom. so it's really unsettling, is what it is.
it's very unsettling. So, very interesting how all these things sort of relate to each other. I mean, they're not directly. I mean, we're not making a statement about Ted Cruz and the Confederate flag, but I mean, there
No,
are
no. Well, it's a
symbols
public
and
service. It's like, what
messages
is the
and
service?
service. Yeah.
That's right, service to the society. What is how do we want to serve the society? And you and I, Tom, were not around when the foundations of slavery came about. We were not around when, the Civil War took place. We were not around when this. We're around now. Is what we're around is now. What does service look like? What does self-service look like? What does care for a nation look like? What does collaboration look like? If Texas thinks of itself as a nation, which many Texans do, remember the Alamo. That's what I have in my head as a belief structure. It's when they have that mindset is that we're in this, by ourselves. We are the lone star state. It's already in there. We're gonna do our own thing here, and the nation has provided space for that messaging and that identity to take place. Now they've got to look at themselves and go like, well, we might be the lone star state, and it was a interesting part of our history, but those other states around us, maybe we need to be more collaborative and cooperative regarding an energy grid, and we can still call ourselves the lone star state. Oh, wait a minute, we have to listen to their regulations. Yeah, you got to listen to the regulations. Oh, we have to upgrade our infrastructure so it matches their power grid. Yeah, you kind of got to do that, and you got to spend some money. Well, that means we need to tax our people a little bit more. Yeah, it's a part of being, a part of being a part of being in the collective, in this
Well, and
space.
I bet you
It's
there are many, many Texans because this affected the entire state. There's probably a
yeah,
majority of Texans who would be willing to have a little more regulation if that meant they get more stability in their
yeah.
electric grid and their water supply going forward and don't have problems like this come up again.
As a messenger, as a communication person, if I was a Democrat in Texas and running for that, I would start that message now. I'd start the message now. If you're a Democrat and you are listening to this podcast, the messaging of how can Texas have the next level of safety and stability by working with the other states around us to support us as we support them, vote for me. And I am pursuing that because what happened to us under uh, with my opponent, what has happened to under my opponent with my opponent's party is that they didn't care for their people. And now you've got the whole thread of communication of I'm showing up for you. And then things go better. So the hypersensitivity of things, the messaging is you got to be really mindful of that in the public setting. And you and I, we see a pile of when we're talking on our line, we see the pile of crap over there. We just do our best not to step in it directly. Now, some people say, well, why don't you just do it like Alex Jones or Rush Limbaugh? Just step in the crap and then people get to rally behind you. Well, that's an example of a short-term payoff. And then you get another short-term payoff, another short-term payoff. But meanwhile, you've got this crappy language narrative around you that you've got to go like, yeah, I said that, but I don't mean it now. And it's like you're always arguing with your own integrity about the good reason why you got the paycheck or got the followers or that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to make sure that we take a look at languaging and being really in touch with and being mindful of that we are in a hyper place, and we need to be more compassionate, more empathetic, use needs-based language to navigate through that. And that's what I teach people to do, and that's what you and I are working on to try to get this way of communicating out to the public, which is really important.
It would definitely improve a lot of people's lives if they had those skills.
Yeah. Now, I think the next time, Tom, what we could do is take a look at is that because the pressure is so much on Zoom and recording, and I know many people step their foot in the crap and they've got to clean it up. Um, that maybe we take a look at how do you message things when you're communicating in a public way, and then have to take accountability, because one of the damages what is taking place is that people are not being held accountable over a long period of time. They're being given a pass, and then they give a second pass, and they're given a third pass. So whereas uh, Nixon, for his part of it, was able to Nixon, for his part, was able to retire and go into being obscure and not say anything and go away and kind of live in that distant shame spot. This is a different time. People get to bounce back and come back and take another run. So we need to take a look at how do we clean things up and be back in alignment with integrity. So
All right. I agree, Bill. Well, I look forward to continuing that discussion. Thanks so much.
all right, thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.